One headlights in the hollow. I've been hauling freight up and down Route 33 for close to 12 years now. I've seen it in every condition. Blazing daylight, black ice, thunderstorms that pound the asphalt so hard it feels like you're driving through gravel. But that night, the night I'm talking about, was the first time I ever truly thought about pulling over, setting the brakes and just waiting for daylight before going another mile. It was just past midnight when I hit the stretch that runs between Riverton and Franklin, the part where the road cuts into the side of the mountain. If you've driven it, you know. Rock face tight on your right. A guardrail on the left that's more suggestion than protection, and beyond that, nothing but air and the kind of drop you don't walk away from. The CB had been quiet for over an hour, and I hadn't passed another truck since leaving the last way station. The night air was heavy, warm for late October, and the fog was thick enough that my high beams just made it worse, turned everything into a white wall. I kept the low beams on, crawling along at 40, maybe less. The only sound was the steady hum of the reefer unit behind me and the soft rattle of an empty soda can in the cup holder. That's when I dropped into the hollow. You know how the road feels different there, like the air itself gets heavier. The tires seem to roll quieter, and even the hum of the engine sounds dampened. The fog pooled thicker in that low spot, clinging to the blacktop in a way that made the painted lines vanish. And then I saw them. Two small white points of light ahead of me. Headlights, low and close together, like an old sedan or maybe a compact pickup. They were moving slowly, weaving slightly, the way someone does when they're trying to keep an eye on a map or a phone. I let off the throttle, giving them space. The last thing I needed was to come up too fast on some drunk kid taking the curves badly. I flicked my high beams, just a quick flash to let them know I was behind. Nothing. The lights didn't react. They just kept that slow, almost drunken sway. That in itself wasn't too strange. Plenty of folks don't check their mirrors like they should. But what got me was the way the fog seemed wrong around them. I eased the truck forward another quarter mile, watching those points of light. And then my stomach went cold. The beams from those headlights weren't hitting the road. There was no spill of light ahead of them, no reflection on the wet blacktop, no glow on the fog. Just the 2 points themselves, floating in the grey. I told myself I was just tired, that the fog was playing tricks, but the closer I got, the more it sank in. There was nothing between me and those lights. No silhouette of a vehicle, no shine of chrome or glass. Just the lights. I kept my hands loose on the wheel, though my knuckles were white. My breathing felt too loud in the cab. I downshifted, the engine growling softly, and crept forward. That's when they started to drift sideways, not turning like a car would, just sliding in the fog, smooth and slow, like they were suspended from wires. And then, without warning, they dropped, not like a car taking a turn downhill. They sank straight down into the dark, vanishing like someone had pulled a plug and drained the light out of the air. I braked hard, the trailer brakes hissing, and just sat there in the middle of the road. My hands were trembling, and I had that crawling sensation in my scalp, like someone was standing right behind me, close enough to breathe on my neck. I checked my mirrors. Nothing but fog. I looked ahead. Just an empty road, the lines barely visible through the haze. I should have kept driving. Any sane person would have. But I sat there another full minute, listening. The fog was so thick it felt like it had weight, pressing against the cab, deadening every sound. No crickets, no wind in the trees, not even the distant rush of water from the river down in the valley. Just my own heartbeat and the slow tick of the engine cooling. Finally, I eased back into gear and started moving. The road climbed out of the hollow in a long, gradual curve, and I didn't see another pair of headlights for the rest of that stretch. 20 miles later, I pulled into a diner just outside Franklin, the kind that's been there forever, with a flickering neon sign and a row of mud-splattered pickups parked out front. I needed coffee, strong, scalding, enough to burn the fog out of my head. Inside, it was quiet. A few loggers sat at one booth, their jackets still damp from the night air. The waitress behind the counter gave me a tired smile and poured a cup before I even asked. I slid onto a stool, my hands still not quite steady. I'd barely taken my first sip when a voice spoke up from 2 seats down. "You come through the hollow tonight?" I turned. The man sitting there looked to be in his 70s, his skin weathered like old barnwood, eyes pale and watery but sharp enough to pin me in place. "Yeah," I said slowly. "Why?" He didn't answer right away, just stirred his coffee, the spoon clinking softly against the mug. Then he said, "You see the lights?" I didn't know how to answer that. My mouth went dry. I started, but he cut me off with a small shake of his head. "It doesn't matter," he said. "Ain't about seeing 'em. It's about them seeing you." The way he said it made my skin prickle. I wanted to ask what he meant, but something in his face told me I didn't want to know the answer. The waitress came by to top off my cup, and when I glanced back, the old man was gone. No sound of the door, no jingle of the bell, nothing. Just gone. I finished my coffee, paid, and got back on the road. But I've never taken that stretch through the hollow at night again, and I still think about what he said. Not about seeing them, about them seeing me. 2. The woman at the wait station. It was one of those nights where the road feels like it's swallowing you whole, the kind of quiet where even your own breathing sounds too loud. I'd been running north up East 77 for hours, hauling a half-full reefer out of Bluefield. Temperature locked at 38 degrees, humming steady in the background. My plan was simple. Make Beckley before 2, shut down, and grab a few hours in the sleeper before heading on toward Charleston. Nothing special, just another late-night run. Traffic had died off long before. The last taillights I'd seen were back near Princeton, and even those faded fast into the black. This stretch of West Virginia highway at night feels like another planet. The forest presses in on both sides, jagged and black against a sky that's just a shade darker. The air smells different out here too. Damp rock, decaying leaves, and something metallic underneath, like wet rail tracks. I had the CB on low, just enough to catch the occasional chatter from other late-night haulers. But for the last hour, it had been nothing but static and my own tires humming over the asphalt. I was maybe 15 miles out from Beckley when I saw the way station lights ahead. Now, here's the thing. That particular way station, just off the shoulder, was rarely open at that hour. Most nights you'd blow right past and see the little sign, closed, hanging crooked in the window. But tonight, the booth light glowed pale yellow through the glass, and the overheads above the lane blinked open in green. No traffic in sight, no other trucks ahead or behind, but those lights looked steady enough. I eased the rig over into the exit lane, my tires hissing over the rumble strip. The air felt heavier the second I left the main road. You ever notice how sometimes, without warning, you get that weight in your chest, like the weather's about to break? That's how it felt. The booth sat maybe 30 yards ahead, small and square with a single floodlight above it. Beyond it, the forest swallowed everything. As I rolled closer, I saw her, a woman, standing just outside the booth door. Pale dress down past her knees, light fabric that stirred a little in the breeze. She had dark hair pulled back loose and was holding a clipboard against her hip. No reflective vest, no uniform, just that simple dress. Her free hand lifted in a small, slow wave, guiding me forward. I couldn't explain why it made me uneasy. Way station attendants come in all shapes and sizes, but at this hour, in that setting, something about her felt misplaced. like she was part of the picture but not part of the scene. I idled up, window down. The reefer hummed behind me, filling the silence. She didn't greet me. No evening, no license and registration. She just stepped forward, held the clipboard out with one hand, eyes down, her nails, long, unpolished, tapped against the wood backing in a slow, deliberate rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. I took it without saying much, glancing at the sheet. It looked like the standard log, truck number, DOT, gross weight, signature line. The pen was already clipped to the top. I signed quickly, my handwriting jerking a bit from the idling engine, and handed it back. She slid it under her arm without looking at it, turned, and stepped back toward the booth. The door opened without a sound, though I could see the heavy metal hinges. She went inside, the light behind the glass shifting just enough for me to catch her silhouette. Then, nothing, no motion, no sound. I sat there for maybe 3 seconds too long, waiting for some wave off or signal that I could go. When none came, I eased off the brake and rolled forward, back toward the merge. The highway ahead looked exactly as it had before, empty, black, and stretching on. It wasn't until I was 20 minutes down the road that it really sank in. My logbook still had the last way station marked as closed from 2 nights back. State regs mean they're supposed to scan your info into the system instantly. I checked the dash unit. Nothing new had been logged. By the time I hit the diner just south of Beckley, the thought was stuck in my head. I pulled into the lot, engine ticking as it cooled, and went inside. The place smelled like burnt coffee and fryer oil, the kind of smell that clings to your jacket. I ordered a black coffee to go, but curiosity got the better of me. I pulled the clipboard sheet from my side pocket. The paper was clean, blank. No truck number, no weight, no scrawled signature in my rushed handwriting. Just a faint smudge in one corner, like it had been handled, and nothing else. The coffee sat untouched. I left a few bills on the counter and walked out, telling myself there had to be some mistake. Maybe the system was glitching. Maybe she had swapped the sheet. Maybe I'd signed too lightly and the pen was dead. Except I can still hear her nails. That slow, steady tapping in the middle of all that silence. No engine noise from the booth, no CB chatter, no bugs against the glass. Just that rhythm. Tap, 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 like she was marking time. I didn't stop there again. For the next few runs, I stayed in the left lane and kept my eyes on the dark tree line as I passed. And every time I did, the way station was dark, the open sign dead, and the booth empty as a shell. But once, about a month later, deep into a foggy run, I swear I saw that pale glow again, just for a second. I didn't look too hard. Some things out here, it's better not to see twice. 3 CB chatter from nowhere. It was a Tuesday night. The kind of quiet run you get in the middle of the week, heading southbound on I-77 through the mountains. The kind of run where the miles stretch long, and the only company you've got is the hum of the engine, the occasional thump from the seams in the asphalt, and that faint, hollow whistle from the wind slipping around the cab. I'd been hauling out of Ohio since late afternoon, a load of dry freight bound for Charlotte, and I figured I'd be clear through the Virginia stretch before sunrise. The weather was steady, dry air, temperature just enough to keep the windows fogging if you didn't keep the defroster on, and traffic was light. The kind of conditions where you could almost forget you were rolling through the spine of the Appalachians. It was just past 2 a.m. when the CB came alive. Not the usual hiss and pop. This was sudden, loud enough to make me glance over at the radio. A voice came through, low, slow. Not the kind of quick banter most drivers use. It had that drawl like someone wasn't in a hurry for you to answer. Breaker, breaker. You out there, long haul? That's my handle. Been using it for 20 years. I don't exactly advertise it anymore unless I'm talking with other truckers I know, and the fact someone was calling me by it out here caught me off guard. I keyed up. "Go ahead, you got long haul." The pause that followed was long enough for me to hear the faint hiss of static under his breathing. Then, "You need to take the next exit." Trouble ahead. The way he said it, it wasn't rushed, it wasn't panicked. But there was weight to it. I could almost picture the guy leaning into the mic, staring at the road through a cracked windshield. I asked him who he was. The answer came without hesitation. A name I hadn't heard in over a decade. Eddie Mathers. When I was a rookie running nights through West Virginia, Eddie was one of the old-timers who took me under his wing. He was the kind of driver who could tell you exactly where the speed traps were, which gas stations wouldn't water down the coffee, and how to handle a mountain downgrade without riding the brakes. Friendly guy, had a laugh that carried over the CB like rolling gravel. He died 15 years ago, rolled his rig clean off a mountain curve in a fog bank. They said he was dead before the truck even caught fire. I'd been to the funeral, seen the burned-out frame of his Peterbilt on the news. I didn't say anything right away, just sat there staring at the radio, listening to the low hiss. Finally, I keyed up again. "You messin' with me? Who is this really?" That's when the channel went dead. Not a click-off, not a fade, just silence, like someone had cut the cord. The next exit was coming up in less than a mile. Nothing special, just one of those small pull-offs leading into a two-lane that wound its way down to some little town you'd never know was there unless you needed fuel or food. In the dark, the sign flashed past green in my headlights, and before I could decide one way or the other, I was already past it. I remember glancing into my side mirror, watching that empty ramp disappear behind me, and feeling this strange little chill, like maybe I just made a mistake without knowing why. The next 10 miles felt different. The road was empty, but it wasn't the peaceful kind of empty anymore. Every reflector post I passed seemed a little too far apart, every curve just a little too sharp. The air in the cab felt heavier, like my heater had switched over to blowing something stale. My eyes kept flicking back to the CB, even though it stayed dead silent. When the red glow started ahead of me, I thought it was brake lights from a car slowing down. But as I came around the curve, the whole highway opened up into chaos. 2 rigs had tangled in the right lane, one jackknifed across both lanes, its trailer twisted at a violent angle, the other shoved halfway into the guardrail. Flashers blinked, lighting up the asphalt in bursts of orange. A couple of cars were stopped behind them, hazard lights cutting through the dark. I eased onto the shoulder and slowed to a stop, my headlights sweeping over the crumpled grille of the nearest truck. It was fresh, maybe minutes old. I could still see steam rising off the crumpled hood, hear the hiss of something leaking. No police yet, no ambulance. Just a couple of people standing in the road, their breath puffing in the cold air, looking around like they didn't quite understand how they'd gotten there. I sat there, hands on the wheel, staring. If I had taken that exit, that thought just sat there, heavy as stone. I stayed put until the first set of blue lights flashed in my mirror, then eased forward when the trooper waved me through. As I passed, I glanced toward the truck that had jackknifed. The driver's door was open. And for a split second, just a flicker in the sweep of my headlights, I could have sworn there was someone standing just past the guardrail, watching the road, too still to be one of the accident victims, too far from the others. When I cleared the mess and hit the open highway again, I reached for the CB, keyed up. "Breaker, anyone got a read on that pileup back there?" Static. "Do any of you hear a warning about it?" Nothing. I kept it on channel 19 for the rest of the run, hoping maybe that voice would come back. Maybe I could figure out who or what I'd been talking to. It never did. By the time I hit the state line, the night had gone back to feeling ordinary. The hiss of tires, the low rumble of the engine, the slow climb of the grade. But I couldn't shake the thought, if that had been Eddie, why warn me? And if it wasn't, Then the darker thought, what if it wanted me to take that exit? I've run that stretch dozens of times since. Never heard the voice again, but I don't use my handle much anymore, and I sure as hell don't answer it if I don't recognize the caller, because sometimes in the dead air between the static, I think I can hear faint breathing, low, slow, like someone waiting for me to key up, and the next exit always seems a little closer than it should be. 4. Rest stop mile marker 219. It was past midnight when I crossed into Pocahontas County. The sky hung low, a solid slab of cloud pressing down, trapping all the night above me. There was no moon, no stars, just the dull glow of my headlights bouncing off the cracked blacktop of the two-lane. The world outside that yellow beam might as well have been endless. I'd been driving north since early evening, hauling a half-empty trailer up from Beckley toward Elkins. My CB had been dead for hours. The FM radio was nothing but static. Out here, cell service was a rumor, the kind of thing people laughed about if you brought it up. It's just you, the road, and whatever the dark decides to hold. I'd been nursing the last bitter mouthful of lukewarm gas station coffee, the kind that coats your tongue in a stale, metallic aftertaste. When my eyes caught something in the high beams, a small green road sign, barely more than a shadow against the trees. No lights, just reflective letters. Rest area. 1 mile. I frowned. I'd driven this stretch more times than I could count, and I didn't remember there being a rest stop between 217 and 221. I know those numbers. I keep track. Mile markers are my little landmarks in the dark, something to break up the hours. That sign didn't make sense. Maybe it was new, or maybe I'd just been too tired, too focused on the road to notice it before. Either way, I figured it was worth a stop. My legs ached, my bladder worse, and my head felt like it was stuffed with cotton. The rest area showed itself just after mile marker 219. A small pull-off on the right, nothing more than a loop of cracked asphalt curling around a low, square building. A single yellow light burned over the men's room door, weak and unsteady. Buzzing faintly as it flickered, the rest of the place was swallowed by shadows. No cars, no trucks, no vending machine glow. I hesitated. Something about the emptiness felt off. The way the light blinked left the whole place stuttering between being there and not there. But my need to stretch and take a leak won. I swung the truck into the lot, gravel crunching under my tires, and killed the engine. The silence after the rumble died was immediate and thick. I stepped out, the heavy door of the cab closing with a metallic thud that seemed far too loud in that stillness. The air was warmer than I'd expected, humid almost, and heavier than it had been on the road. It clung to my skin in a way that made me think of basements and places underground. The only sound was the slow tick of the engine cooling behind me. The building was cinder block, painted a washed-out beige that looked grey under the weak light. The bulb over the men's room door buzzed each time it flickered, casting thin shadows that jumped and shrank across the walls. Halfway there, I noticed the smell. It wasn't the chemical sting you expect from a roadside bathroom. This was richer, thicker, wet dirt, moss, and something else beneath it. Something faintly sour, almost sweet, like rot just beginning to set in. I pushed through the door. The air inside was cold enough to raise goosebumps along my arms. The sound of dripping water echoed, sharp and rhythmic, bouncing off the tiled walls. My boots squeaked on the damp floor. The layout was standard: 2 urinals on the left, 3 stalls on the right. The first 2 stall doors stood open. The third was shut. From behind that closed door came a faint sound, a soft shuffle, like bare feet moving against wet tile. I stopped. The smell of earth was stronger here, curling in the back of my throat. I crouched slightly, peering under the stall partition. That's when I saw them. Two pale, bare feet planted on the wet floor. The toes were splayed, the skin almost grey under the flickering fluorescent light. They didn't move. "Hey, buddy," I said, trying to keep my voice casual, though it sounded too loud in the small room. "You all right in there?" No answer. Not even the shift of weight you'd expect, just the dripping water and the faint hum of the light overhead. I stepped closer, my boots splashing in shallow puddles. The smell hit me harder now, and I realized there were little clumps of dark soil scattered on the tile, mashed flat where they'd been stepped on. I bent again, looking under the partition. Still the feet, still motionless. Something in my gut told me to leave, but I put my hand on the stall door. The latch wasn't even engaged. It swung open with a slow, complaining creak. The stall was empty. I froze. The floor where the feet had been was wet and muddy. Small clumps of earth spread in uneven patches. The water puddled darker where someone had been standing. Across the tile leading out from that spot were a set of barefoot prints. Small. Too small for an adult, maybe a child's. The prints trailed right past me out the open doorway. Every hair on my neck stood on end. I turned toward the entrance, my boots feeling suddenly too heavy. Beyond the threshold, past the jaundiced circle of light, the footprints continued across the cracked asphalt, glistening slightly before fading into the gravel shoulder. And then they disappeared into the tree line. The woods beyond were black. Not just dark, black. I stood there, my eyes straining for any hint of movement. Nothing, not even the sound of night insects. I should have gone back to the truck, but I stepped forward instead. The smell of wet earth grew thicker the closer I got, wrapping around me, settling in my throat. I stopped at the edge of the gravel, where the forest began its wall of shadow. I listened. For a long time, there was nothing. Then, faint, deep in the trees, a splash like a bare foot stepping into shallow water. The sound was too far to see the source, but close enough that my mind could place it. I didn't move. The silence after that splash was absolute. Not just quiet, expectant, like something in those woods was holding its breath. Slowly, I backed away until the building's flickering light was in my periphery again. My boots felt heavier, like I'd waded through mud, though the pavement under me was dry. I turned, walked quickly back to the truck, and climbed in, locking the doors before the engine even turned over. The rest stop faded in the mirrors as I pulled back onto the two-lane. My eyes locked on the mile markers, then 221. And that's when I realized there was no sign for a rest area from the northbound side. Later, I tried to find it on a map. There was nothing. No listing for any facility near 219. And yet, sometimes, running that route at night, I'll catch a break in the trees past 218. Sometimes I think I see a flicker of yellow light. I don't stop anymore, but when the air turns heavy and smells like wet dirt, I remember those pale feet, still waiting for me to open the door. 5. The bridge on County Road. 14. I'd been running loads up and down the eastern states for over 20 years, and I've taken just about every kind of road you can imagine, wide, flat stretches of interstate that lull you into a half-doze if you're not careful, mountain passes with switchbacks so tight they make your jaw ache from clenching, and those narrow, winding back roads where the trees grow right up to the edge of the asphalt, their branches arching overhead like ribs. You learn to read the feel of a road after a while. Some feel new, fresh, even friendly. Others, they carry a weight, like the pavement itself remembers things you don't want to know. County Road 14 was one of those roads. I only ever took it once. It was about 10 years ago now, but I can still see it plain as day, or plain as night, I guess. I was headed north on a run from Roanoke to Charleston. My dispatcher told me there'd been some kind of closure on the interstate, and if I wanted to make up time, I could cut through Pocahontas County. "It's narrow and old," he'd said, "but it'll get you there faster if you don't mind a little dark." I should have just stayed on the highway. The turnoff wasn't much, just a bent green sign, half swallowed by brush, leaning like it had been hit once and never fixed. The blacktop narrowed right away, barely wide enough for 2 cars to pass, and the trees closed in fast. Thick walls of trunks on either side. My rig's high beams lit up the bark and low branches, and the leaves flashed green and silver as they whipped past. The farther I went, the more it felt like the road was folding in on me, the outside world slipping away. No houses, no cars, not even the glow of porch lights in the distance. Just the engine's low hum and the occasional slap of a branch against the trailer. I kept the CB on out of habit, half listening to a couple of other drivers talking about weather up near Wheeling, then some faint country music on another channel. But the voices thinned out as I went, fading into faint static, like I was driving away from the world. By the time I was 15 minutes in, it was just hiss and crackle, the kind that makes your scalp tighten. The road dipped and rose, twisting between hollows where the trees seemed older. I started seeing patches of fog clinging low over the ditches, even though it wasn't that cold out. It smelled different down there too, less like wet leaves and more like standing water, with that faint, sour undertone of something gone still too long. About 20 minutes in, I rounded a long curve and came into a little valley. The moon was bright enough to see a narrow creek down there, black as oil, running under an old timber bridge. You could tell the thing had been there longer than the county road itself. The planks were silver grey with age, and the guardrails were nothing but 2x6s nailed between posts. The bridge looked just barely wide enough for the rig. I slowed to a crawl, letting my headlights wash over the first few boards. My tires made a low, hollow sound as they touched the wood. That's when I saw him. At the far end of the bridge, where the planks met the gravel road again, a man stood dead center in my lane. Tall, over 6 feet, I'd guess, but with his shoulders hunched like he was cold. His head was down, and he didn't move when my lights hit him. My first thought was, maybe he was broken down, maybe drunk, maybe hurt. But I didn't see any vehicle, no bag or flashlight, just him, standing there like he'd been waiting. I eased my foot off the gas, letting the truck roll forward slow. Something about him made the knot in my stomach tighten. At that distance, I should have been able to make out details. His jacket, maybe the shape of his face, but it was like looking through heat waves. His outline shimmered faintly, the edges warping in and out, and my eyes kept trying to adjust like the focus was wrong. Halfway across, the air in the cab changed. I don't know how else to say it. It was like all the movement stopped. The wind, the hum of the tires, even the rumble of the engine seemed to pull back, like sound itself was getting farther away. My ears popped like I'd climbed a hill too fast. The hair on my arms stood straight up. When the headlights hit him full on, my breath caught. That shimmer was stronger now, almost like the light was bending around him. My instincts started screaming to keep moving, but I hesitated just long enough to blink, and he was gone. Not walking away, not stepping to the side, just gone. The road ahead was empty, the gravel catching the light like nothing had been there. My grip on the wheel went white-knuckled. I don't know why I did it, but I checked my mirrors. The bridge behind me was wet with dew, the boards gleaming, and right near the centerline, I swear, I saw a single dark footprint appear, bare, human. Then it faded like the wood drank it in. That's when my CB cut out entirely. The music fizzled into a sharp, grating static that filled the cab, louder than before. I tried flipping channels, but it was just the same hiss and pop no matter where I turned. My scalp prickled so bad it almost hurt, like someone was standing right behind my seat. I didn't dare look. I eased the truck forward, slow at first, then faster until the planks thudded to gravel and the bridge was behind me. The static stayed with me for another mile, maybe more, before it cut off mid-burst and the CB came back, like nothing had happened. I kept glancing in the mirrors, expecting something, but the road stayed empty. When I hit the highway again, I didn't even realize I'd been holding my breath. I pulled into the first truck stop I saw, one of those older ones with buzzing lights over the pumps and a tiny diner inside. The cashier was a thin old guy with deep lines in his face and a voice like gravel. I asked him if he knew anything about County Road 14, about that bridge. He just looked at me for a long moment, like he was deciding whether or not to bother answering. Finally, he said, "Ain't no one in their right mind drives that way after dark." I pressed him for more. He shrugged, rang up my coffee. Back in the 50s, a drunk fellow in a pickup clipped the rail and went over. Sheriff found him next morning in the creek. Folks say he still walks it, but... He met my eyes, real steady. "You didn't stop, did you?" I told him no. He nodded once, slow, like that was the only right answer. I left soon after, but I haven't taken that road again. Even now, some nights, I'll be driving a long, empty stretch, and my CB will fuzz out for a few seconds. And when it does, I feel that same heavy stillness settle in the cab. I keep my eyes forward. I don't check the mirrors. Not anymore. 6. The Hitchhiker with No Face. It was a little past midnight, somewhere east of Charleston, and the rain had been coming down in sheets since I'd crossed the West Virginia line. Not the kind of steady rain you can settle into, but the kind that feels alive. A constant barrage that swallows sound and light, turning the road ahead into a grey, melting smear. My wipers were going full tilt, but it barely made a difference. I'd been driving for hours, the hum of the tires and the hypnotic sway of the road working their way into my bones. I was coming back from visiting an old friend in Kentucky, and the trip had stretched longer than I'd planned. By the time I hit the mountain roads, my body was aching from the seat, my eyelids heavy in that dangerous way where every mile starts to feel the same. There's a stretch out here, maybe 20 miles between towns, more if you count the ones too small for a real gas station, where you can drive without passing another soul. Most folks don't like these roads after dark, not just because of the weather, but because of the space between people. The hills feel older here, like they've seen too much. People say they hold on to things, memories, names, even whole people, and that if you're not careful, you'll run into something that never left. I'd heard that all my life, usually from the kind of people who didn't smile much and didn't tell you the whole story. I never put much stock in it. Places get reputations, especially rural ones. I figured it was just another way of keeping outsiders wary. But that night, I learned some things aren't just stories. I just rounded a bend, tires hissing through the puddles, when my headlights caught her. She was standing on the shoulder, rain plastering her hair flat to her head. Her thumb was stuck out in that old-fashioned way you hardly see anymore, like something from a hitchhiking movie from the 70s. She couldn't have been more than 25, thin, bare-legged, wearing a grey dress that clung to her like wet paper. No coat, no bag, no car nearby. I should have kept driving. Every part of me told me to keep going. But she stood there so still, too still, and something about it made me think she wasn't going to last much longer out there. I slowed, rolling down the passenger window. "You need a ride?" My voice felt small against the roar of the rain. She didn't answer, just opened the door and climbed in. That's when the smell hit me. It wasn't just the wet fabric smell you expect from someone soaked through. There was something else, something faintly metallic, sharp, like a jar of pennies left open in the rain. It sat heavy in the back of my throat. She didn't shiver, didn't try to wring out her sleeves, just sat there with her hands folded neatly in her lap, head turned forward. Water dripped steadily from her dress onto the rubber floor mat, pooling in a slow, spreading puddle. I tried for small talk, just to make the silence less oppressive. "Where you headed?" She turned her head toward me, slowly, like she was underwater. And that's when I realized something was wrong. It wasn't that she was hurt, no bruises, no blood. It was her face. Or rather, the way my eyes refused to hold onto it. I could see the shape of her jaw, the shadow where her nose should be, but the rest slid away as I looked, as if I was staring at her through shifting water. The harder I tried to focus, the more it slipped. My stomach turned cold, my grip on the wheel tightened until my knuckles ached. I didn't remember deciding to, but my foot pressed down hard on the accelerator. The road blurred under the rain. I kept my eyes fixed forward, afraid that if I looked again, she'd be closer. When I finally glanced sideways, the seat was empty. The door was still shut. The seatbelt untouched. Just the steady drip of rainwater on the mat where she'd been. I should have pulled over right then, should have turned back toward Charleston, put every mile I could between me and that spot. But I told myself it was exhaustion, hallucination, maybe. I'd been driving too long in bad weather. The mind plays tricks. A mile later, the sound of the rain began to change. It was subtle at first, less like water smacking metal and more like fingertips brushing across the roof, deliberate and slow. The smell came back too, stronger this time. That metallic tang filled the cab until I was breathing it, until it coated my tongue. My hands were trembling when I glanced in the rearview mirror. She was in the back seat. Her head was tilted slightly to the side, as if she were listening to something far off. The blur where her face should have been seemed worse now, moving in tiny spirals like the surface of disturbed water. My throat closed. The wheel shook under my grip. I don't know how long she sat there. It might have been seconds. It might have been minutes. When I dared to look again, the back seat was empty, but the floor mat was wet. By the time I saw the lights of a gas station, my body was running on instinct. I pulled in too fast, the tires splashing through the lot's standing water. Inside, the place was nearly empty, just an old man behind the counter and the faint hum of the coolers. Two semis idled out front, their drivers nowhere in sight. I must have looked worse than I thought, because before I could even ask, the old man slid a paper cup of coffee toward me. "You're white as a sheet," he said. "Long drive." "From Kentucky," I managed. My voice sounded far away. I didn't tell him everything, just said I'd picked up a hitchhiker and she'd vanished before I could drop her anywhere. The color drained from his face. He leaned in like he was going to say something important, but then stopped. All he said was, "You keep to the main roads the rest of your way, son." I stayed on the lit highways all the way home. But sometimes, late at night, when the rain's heavy enough, that smell creeps in again, and every time it does, I find myself glancing in the rearview mirror, just in case. 7-night delivery to Old Mine. 12. It was a little after 10 when dispatch called. I'd just finished unloading at a feed store 2 towns over and had already been on the road since before sunrise. My back hurt, my eyelids were getting heavy, and I'd been picturing a cold beer in my couch for the past 2 hours. The voice on the other end was too cheerful for that late at night. "One last run for you, Mike. Short haul, promise, easy money." I almost said no before they even gave me the details. They said it was just a pallet, drop-off at a shack, no sign-in needed beyond leaving it inside. Up past Fairview and along the ridge toward the old mining roads. They might as well have said middle of nowhere with no cell service. I knew the place. Everyone did. Those roads have a way of chewing up tires and making the back of your neck itch, but rent was due, and over time pay always made me forget my better judgment. I told them to send me the manifest and route, topped off the tank at the last lit gas station, and pointed my rig toward the hills. Once you get outside Charleston and past the last set of traffic lights, the world changes. The brightness fades like a dimmer switch, turning down. It's not just darker, it's heavier, quieter. The air feels thicker, colder, like you're driving into something that doesn't want you there. The highway bled into a narrow 2-lane road. The lines were faded, and the asphalt had been patched so many times it looked like a quilt. Houses were scarce and set far back from the road. The occasional sagging barn or rusted pickup on cinder blocks broke up the trees, but mostly it was just pine and oak pressing in on either side. The weather didn't help. A thin, cold drizzle fell, beating up on the windshield but refusing to freeze. My wipers made that dry, squeaking sound that sets your teeth on edge. The GPS signal flickered, cutting in and out like it was losing the will to keep going. Eventually, it routed me onto a gravel road marked by a wooden sign with half the board rotted away. The paint was so faded, it was just ghost lines on grey wood. The road wound uphill. Loose rock crunched under my tires, and the incline made the engine groan. Branches scraped the sides of my truck and tapped against the mirrors like impatient fingers. I kept my high beams on, but all that did was throw pale light against the endless wall of trunks ahead. The silence was starting to feel unnatural. I'd grown up around woods. They're never truly quiet. There's always something, crickets, frogs, wind in the branches. But here it was just the hum of my engine and the occasional pop of gravel. No insects, no wind, no life. After another slow bend, the mine site appeared, or what was left of it. My headlights swept over rusted conveyor belts, piles of moss-covered rock, and an old crane leaning like it had been frozen mid-collapse. The whole place looked like it had been abandoned decades ago and never visited since. The shack sat 30 feet from the road, weathered boards warped from years of rain and cold. The door was ajar. My lights caught the edges of the frame, and for a moment it looked like the wood was breathing with the shadows. I killed the engine, but kept the lights on. The cold hit me immediately, sharper now without the cab's heater. My boots crunched over wet gravel as I wrestled the pallet jack from the back. The load was shrink-wrapped, glistening in the beams, no markings beyond a faded shipping label. The shack's door groaned when I pushed it open. The hinges were gummy with rust, and the sound carried unnaturally far into the night. Inside, a single bare bulb swayed gently from the ceiling, its light pooled over a desk with an old clipboard. The smell hit me, wet wood, mildew, and something metallic underneath, like tools that had been left out in the rain. I wheeled the pallet inside, set it against the wall, and signed the manifest on the clipboard. The pen's ink was watery, almost frozen. That's when I saw the mud on the floor. Fresh mud. I froze. My boots had tracked in a clear set of prints, heavy, round-toed work boots, size 11. I knew my own tread pattern. But right next to them, staggered just slightly behind, was another set. They were narrower, lighter, and every single one was exactly behind mine, like whoever made them had been close enough to match me step for step. A chill ran through my spine. I looked toward the open door. My headlights still lit the gravel road outside. No movement, no sound, just that awful, pressing quiet. Backing out of the shack, I scanned the tree line. The rain had picked up, cold needles against my skin. I followed the prints with my eyes. They didn't stop at the shack. They led away, into the woods. Something about the way they vanished between the trees made my chest tighten. I should have just climbed in the truck and left, but my job wasn't technically done until I locked the place, and there was this thought in the back of my head. What if someone was out here and hurt? I stepped toward the tree line. My flashlight cut into the first row of trunks, the beam catching glistening leaves and slick bark. The prints went deeper, swallowed by the dark. I couldn't see more than 15 feet in. Then I heard it, a branch snapping. Not loud, more like the sound of weight slowly shifting on wet wood. It was close, too close, and not in front of me. Off to the right. I swung the beam that way, my heart thudding in my ears. Nothing but trees and dripping branches. Hello? My voice sounded too small. Another step in the leaves, this time to my left. I turned the flashlight again, empty. I started backing toward the shack, moving slow. My instincts screamed to run, but it felt like if I made a sudden move, whatever was out there would move faster. When I got to the truck, I climbed in and slammed the door, locking it automatically. My hands shook as I started the engine. My headlights swept across the shack one last time, and for a fraction of a second, I saw something at the edge of the trees. Still, tall, no face I could make out, just the shape of a head and shoulders darker than the black around it. I blinked, and it was gone. I didn't wait. I threw the truck in reverse, gravel spraying under the tires. The mirrors showed nothing but the road falling away behind me, but the feeling of being followed didn't fade until I hit the highway. Even now, I can't stop thinking about those prints. They were in perfect alignment with mine, as if whoever made them had been stepping there the whole time. So close I should have felt breath on my neck, and if I hadn't turned around when I did, I think they would have followed me right out of the woods.